Have you ever felt like you needed to wear a mask just to fit in? I'll never forget my first day of college. Here I was, a 26-year-old high school dropout. I hadn't been in a classroom in at least 10 years. And when I was in a classroom, I was a horrible student. And then when I compared myself to everybody else at that Christian college, I was a very new Christian. Only for about 3 years had I been a believer. And then to top things off, I was in Texas. I felt out of place just being in this strange land. Uh, and at this school, there was a dress code that would never exist in California. I felt very out of place, and in a way, I felt very unworthy to be there. So the night before my first day, I spent way too much time picking out what to wear. I felt like it was a freshman year of high school all over again. And then I spent the whole next morning on the drive to school rehearsing what I would say. I just I just wanted to look like I belonged. Now, why did I feel that way? Well, it's because I was nervous, and that was normal. But I was also wondering, what if I just don't fit in? What if I look out of place? What if people can tell that I have no idea what I'm doing? But instead of being honest, instead of being real and open, I put on my best smile. I pretended like I was confident. And I hoped that no one would notice the truth. I hoped that no one would notice how much I was scrambling on the inside. And maybe you felt that way at some point in your life too. Maybe you've had a moment where you felt like you just had to wear a mask so you could be accepted. That's the pressure I want to talk about today. We live in a filtered world. You can have AI clean up your photo, crop out the mess, edit your story to be anything that you want it to be. You can have it make it look like everything is A-OK. Most of us learn early on that it feels safer to be polished than it is to be real. So we show up with a big smile on our face, even if we're falling apart on the inside. We post the highlights and hide the struggles. We like to curate a version of ourselves that looks acceptable. That's why we take 20 selfies just to post one, and why we'll clean up the living room before a Zoom call while laundry is piled up all around, just out of frame. But here's the problem: you can't heal from what you won't admit, and you can't be fully loved if you're never fully known. Now, the gospel is for everyone, but it can only transform us when we're honest about who we actually are. The gospel is most effective on people who are willing to admit, I don't have it all together. Paul talks specifically about this in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. He writes, but Jesus said to me, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me. For when I am weak, then I am truly strong. But that's not the message we hear in our world very often. Most people will tell you, be strong, hide your flaws, never let them see you sweat. We're told, excuse me, we're told weakness will embarrass us. Weakness will disqualify us, leave us behind. But Jesus flips the script. maybe your weakness looks like that anxiety that you just can't shake, or the bills, the many, many bills that you just can't seem to keep up with, or that feeling that you're falling behind when everybody else seems to be moving forward. You know, I've felt that way before too. There have been seasons in my life where I thought, man, if I can just push through. So when I feel that way, I just keep on saying yes. And in that, I overcommit. And I'm trying to hold it all together. And when I do that, I honestly get to a point where I'm just running on empty. And the moment I stop pretending that I have it all together and say to God, I can't do this alone, that's when real peace comes. It was in my weakness, not in my strength. And in that moment, God reminded me, my grace is enough for you. You know, sometimes the most spiritual thing that you or I can do is to stop pretending like you're fine. Stop pretending like everything is just okay and let God meet you in the mess. That's why Jesus says, bring me your weakness, bring me your limits, bring me your failures, because that's where I can actually work. Think about that, okay? When you come to the end of yourself, when you're running out of energy, when you're running out of ideas, when you're running out of willpower, that's the moment you finally make space for God's strength to carry you. Paul isn't celebrating suffering for the sake of suffering. He's celebrating that even in his lowest places, God's grace shines brightest. Jesus did more than just talk about that, right? He lived it out. The world expected the very specific things of a Messiah. They expected a Messiah that would conquer the world with power, that would conquer the world with military might. But Jesus chose the path of the cross. So what looked like weakness, you know, his suffering, his surrender, his humility, was actually victory. So if the greatest victory in the history of humankind came through surrender, maybe your breakthrough won't come from acting like you're holding it all together, but rather from handing it over. You know, what feels like your biggest failure might actually be the starting point of God's biggest work in you. What if the parts of your life you're most ashamed of, the mistakes you try to hide, the struggles that you cover up, are actually places where God wants to show their power? And weakness doesn't just look like some variation of exhaustion. Sometimes it looks like doubt. You know, think about Thomas for just a minute. John chapter 20. After the resurrection, Thomas hears the other disciples say, we have seen Jesus. We have seen our Messiah. We have seen our Lord. But Thomas just can't get there. He says in verse 25, I won't believe unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them and place my hand into the wound in his side. That's not polished faith, is it? That is raw, vulnerable honesty. Some of you may feel that. Unless I see God answer this prayer, unless I feel something real, unless I can actually hear God speaking to me. I just can't believe. That's Thomas. And when Jesus showed up, he doesn't scold Thomas. Rather, he invites him to come closer. Verse 27. He says, "Reach out and touch me. See the punctures in my hand. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Leave behind your doubts and believe." You see what's happening here? Paul says God's power shows up in weakness. And Thomas shows that even doubt can become a place where Jesus meets us. Thomas didn't fake it. He didn't fake it. He didn't pretend to believe just to fit in with the others. All the other disciples, they had witnessed Jesus. And it would have been easier for Thomas just to pretend and blend in. But he didn't do that. Thomas was honest. And because he was honest, Jesus met him right where he was. Maybe you've prayed a prayer like that yourself. God, if you're real, I need you to show me. I was talking with a woman not too long ago who grew up in church but had kind of quietly walked away from her faith in her 20s. She told me, "I wanted to believe, but honestly, I just couldn't fake it anymore. I prayed for God to heal my mom when she was sick, and nothing changed. I asked for direction when I felt lost, and all I got was silence. And unless God showed up in a real way, I knew that I just couldn't keep believing." And she said that she carried that tension for years. But then a friend invited her to a small group, not a place where she had to pretend. It was a safe place, a place where she could be honest about her questions. And that night, she said what most people were afraid to admit as they were having their discussion time. She said, "I don't know if I believe anymore." But instead of pushing her away, the people there listened. They prayed with her and they walked with her. And over time, she began to realize that Jesus wasn't scolding her for doubting. He was meeting her right there, just like he did with Thomas. Her faith didn't come back all at once. It wasn't some miracle that happened, but it came back in a different way, because this time it was real. It wasn't polished, it was real. It was honest, not fake. It was her faith, not the faith that she had inherited from her parents. We don't grow by pretending. We don't grow by hiding behind this mask. We grow when we're honest about where we really are. Jesus doesn't wait until you've cleaned yourself up. He steps right into the mess. That's why one of our core values here at Kindred is real over polished. Why? Because honesty creates connection. The church isn't supposed to be a museum for people who've got it all together. It's meant to be a hospital for the weary and the broken. Jesus isn't building a brand. He's building a family. And families don't need to perform. They just need you to be present. Masks might impress people, but only honesty can change people. Only honesty can change you. Imagine a community where instead of asking how you are and hearing "I'm fine," you hear, "It's been a rough week." And then someone sits with you in all that roughness. So how do we implement this core value of real over polished into our everyday lives? Not just in word, but in action. Well, it means committing ourselves right? It means committing ourselves to showing up with honesty. Well, but what does that look like? Well, it means admitting that you're struggling. If you're having a bad day, admit it. If you're having a rough time with what you believe, admit it. Admit when you're struggling. Even if you see yourself as being the strong one, admit it. It means being willing to ask for prayer, not just being the person who offers it. It's saying, I don't know, or I'm not okay. And it means letting others meet you where you are. It means taking that mask off and trusting that grace will hold what is real. Vulnerability isn't weakness. A lot of times we treat people that way, but vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's actually how connections are made. Imagine walking into a church where you don't have to fake it. I have lost count of the number of conversations I've had with people who have avoided church. And almost every time I ask why, the answer is nearly the same. Well, I just felt like I needed to get my life together first. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you don't need to be polished to show up. You just need to be real. And it's that honesty that opens the door for God to do something new. That's the kind of family Jesus is building here. Think for a minute about Mother Teresa. People remember Mother Teresa as this giant of faith and compassion. And she was in many, many ways. In her private letters, though, she confessed to deep seasons, years of doubt. She wrote things like, I feel that God does not want me anymore. At another point in her life, she confessed, I do not believe God is God. And sometimes I feel as though he does not exist at all. That kind of honesty shocks us, right? We expect people like her to have just this unshakable faith, but she refused to hide her struggle. She shared it with her confessors. She shared it with her mentors. And here's the powerful part. In being honest, she found the strength to keep going, to keep loving, to keep serving. Her legacy isn't that she never doubted. It's that she was honest about her doubts. And God met her exactly where she was. Now, if someone like Mother Teresa wrestled with doubt and still lived an incredible life of impact, then there's room for your questions and doubts too. If Mother Teresa had room for doubt and still made space to love people, and there's space for your doubts too. Jesus meets us in what is real. He never says, fake it till you make it. He says, come to me as you are. Come with your questions, with your scars, with your I'm not there yet faith. And when you do, he will say, peace be with you. So the invitation this week is simple. Stop performing and just start showing up. You don't have to impress God. Jesus isn't waiting for some polished, perfect version of you. He already knows the real you and loves you just the way you are. The invitation today is to stop performing and just start trusting Jesus with your real life, your whole life. Because when we're weak, then we're strong. And when we're real with Jesus and each other, that's when we grow. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again next week.